not define futures for everyone else, but working with experts, including political scientists, economists, I guess that's how you say it, and so on, generate futures that act as a catalyst for public debate and discussion about the kinds of future people really want. Design can give experts permission to let their imaginations flow freely, give material expression to the insight to the insights generated, ground these imaginations in everyday situations, and provide platforms for future collaborative speculation. And inspired from that book, and inspired from the idea of speculative design as an approach towards many elements that I use in my daily work as a type designer, as a multidisciplinary designer. Um, I'm gonna showcase with you here how, in some cases, um, I approached typography and created some sort of a formula that guided me through these examples. Um, Starting from the idea of the starting point of being a multidisciplinary designer, and before speaking about history, I started also as an activist in Egypt in 2007, 2006, 2007. Um, I found, and at that time, on a very oppressed situation in Egypt, and the old regime back then, which didn't change much after the revolution, but that's not the point now. I thought about, if we are trying to deliver messages and to widely spread these messages to wider audience, I started collecting the inspiration more from the pop culture of the streets of Cairo. And to that, I found, as someone who likes to start to work with calligraphy and typography, I found a lot of inspiration on the trucks, in the khayamiya patterns that you would see in funerals, or even in marriage parties or weddings, on the walls in the poor neighborhoods, and you can basically find it everywhere. And I found that this can definitely be a source of inspiration. Growing up in poor areas of Cairo, I've always had certain images of old posters, old typography, calligraphy emblems that I saw as a child, and it somehow stuck with me, and carrying it on as I get older, and even as I explore my passion with design. So I found these that presence of typography and calligraphy in the book culture to be a very good starting point for inspiration. If I want to speak to wider ground of audience, then the familiarity of the Bob visual culture would bring to this. And mainly at that time, this were the source of an inspiration for me. And we can see some of the examples here that is collected from the book called Khat, Egypt's Calligraphic Landscape, the photos by Noha Zaid, and it's a collaborative work between Noha and Basma Hamdi. And from starting from the point of collecting the visual inspiration from the book culture, I started thinking of, okay, I can start from the familiarity of these visuals to hacking these visuals with my own narrative. Um, Most of the visuals had religious backgrounds, Quran pieces, famous prayers, but I wanted to use that kind of familiarity and hack it by introducing a different narrative, a narrative that I believe in, that is part of a certain movement I'm trying to be involved and being part of, and found that this kind of mix would eventually speculate towards a different result, or at least propose different narratives as maybe a solution, or maybe as just a recommendation of what we can think of as an alternative solution. And taking from that to the delivery. I'll start with like a couple of the examples that I worked on. This emblem I created in 2008, and it's inspired by, at least it was famous for me to see in Egypt sometimes, to see a writing that says "Kun ma'Allah," or be with God. And I found the word itself and the form of order in it, as in kun, like just be with God, uh, to be somehow to be inspiring. There is a little bit of forcing in the vocabulary itself, but at the same time, the way it injects your brain with the narrative, with the word, was very inspiring. And from taking from that inspiration of that emblem, I created this piece back at the time. At that time, we had a general strike in 2008, and the narrative of a revolution was not even present in our wildest imagination, even as a part of an activist movement back in Egypt in that time. But still, I found that this would be the kind of hack that I can like inject into this design that I wanted to work on. And I created this artwork in 2008, and it published it on the internet under Creative Commons license. And it had some kind of acceptance. It had a little bit of a spread, but 3 years later, by the time of 2011, it just went viral somehow. Suddenly, I found people in the square in Tahrir wearing it on t-shirts, printing it on t-shirts, printing it on posters, spraying it on walls in Cairo. Later on a visit to Beirut, I found it sprayed on walls in Beirut. Friends in Tunis started sending me photos of it being spread in Tunis as well. Libya, Syria, in Saudi Arabia even too. Like I have like a I was actually surprised at that time of how just like an emblem that I made in 2008, people related to, in a moment of in a dreamy moment of a revolution that no one expected, not even the regime itself, nor the actual activists that were part of a movement and actually dreaming of a revolution one day. Everyone was just surprised. It took us by surprise that everyone just like got involved with it. But somehow I felt like this kind of combination between the familiarity of the visual, it doesn't look much different than any of the emblems that you would see on the back of a truck, or you would see it illustrated on a wall of someone who recently did the Hajj, and they celebrated him by creating one of these emblems on the wall of his building. Um, and I believe the familiarity of the visual itself and hacking it by the narrative of revolution somehow aided this kind of spread. From that, I also created another one. This one reads "Yaqini بالثورة يقيني," and it's also inspired by a word that doesn't come in this certain, little bit complicated form, but it usually you would see it on the truck saying "Yaqini billah yaqini," my belief in God protects me. This one says my belief in the revolution protects me. And I made this one in 2012 in a time where the revolution and the movement was not necessary at a very strong ground. But to get back to the inspiration, you can actually, in a photo here, you can see where this one comes from. And this is like the photo, the first photo on the right. It says "Yaqini billah yaqini," and this is very common on the trucks in Cairo. You would see many of the trucks having it illustrated in this specific form. And this is also where I created the familiarity of the emblem, hacked it also with the narrative. And it also was like succeeded in approaching, I don't want to say wide audience. It's more like people were able to relate to. They felt familiar with it. It spoke to them, and also shared it around. Was sprayed as a stencil in many places in Cairo. From that also is another example that I worked on with an NGO in Egypt. It was a campaign, also post the revolution, about the patient's rights in Egypt and having just the basic rights of being a patient. And in this campaign as well, I tried to work with typography as the main element, as the, if you may say, as the medium where everyone is coming out from. Um, this as well is another example, a lettering that I made for a campaign in 2016, I guess, or 15, I'm not sure. And it was to in support of a case where a famous writer in Egypt was put in jail just for publishing a novel at that time, and it reads ضد محاكمة الخيال, or against taking imagination to court. Um, for this one, I tried to just like work with something a little bit not very usual to the eye. Doesn't look like anything you would see in the streets of Cairo. Just like to experiment with a different way of working on it. Especially that the case of the campaign was a specific, and it was talking to specific part of the society, or maybe like a specific people of interest. And it takes me to this one. It's a recent piece that I made. It reads الحرية لبنات التيك or freedom for the women of TikTok. And I made this in support of a movement that is going in Egypt now. It's a Me Too movement linked to a very disturbing case where the regime decided to put women in jail for having TikTok accounts. Basically, they put them in jail for being women, sadly. And for this one, I tried to reflect, not necessarily work with the familiarity. I worked with the inspiration comes from the Kundusi style, which is not an Egyptian style of calligraphy, or you would see it in the streets of Cairo. But I felt that as much as the case itself is shocking, I wanted you to approach a different style of calligraphy, especially that the case was like being widespread. So I felt like it, as much as sometimes it's good to introduce, for the hack to be about introducing the narrative, sometimes I also do it the other way around, where the hack is introducing a not so familiar calligraphy style to a wider audience. And this one as well, like it did a reach out to a wide number of people as well. From that, I'd like to talk about something related to why and how typography for me as a designer became a tool and a medium for expression. I started navigating my passion as a designer in a time where there was a very intense oppressing system in Egypt, a regime in Egypt, where going to the streets was not a very safe option. And at that time, the internet became the area where we felt a little bit safe, where we had a little bit of freedom. And I found a big similarity between that kind of fascism and the current situation of a pandemic. Basically, like as everyone I'm sure seen, the pandemic was used multiple times as a tool for individual fascism against movement like Black Lives Matters, or just on a very basic individual scale, where people found the pandemic to be an enough reason for them to be fascist about some stuff, like as in being aggressive, or thinks that the pandemic is enough reason to be racist or to express this racism and have some kind of justification for it. And for both situations that I find to be very familiar, between the fascism of the pandemic and the fascism of being under a regime like what we used to have in Egypt and what we still have in Egypt up to this moment, I found that type tech can really be, or the technology related to typography can be really a very handy tool. And in support of a Me Too movement that is going in Egypt, I worked on this project, uh, which is like I can first show it's a simple website under the domain name no means no, or n means no, I guess that's how, yeah, no m no .net. And the idea for me was that while we are in a time where we can't hit the street for multiple reasons, it's not safe in Egypt to go in the street for political reasons, and at the same time there is a pandemic, so not much people will be interested into hitting the streets for any cause. While women finally getting a chance to express their anger or to express the kind of oppression they've been experiencing their whole life, from abusers, from rapists, and so on. And for that reason, I found that variable type can really be a handy tool and can be a very aiding technology to do this kind of expressing for us. And this is how this basic one was done. It's basically a variable font and a very basic CSS code that created this kind of movement for us. Um, and what I was going after is just to reflect the feeling of chanting, the feeling of someone who is chanting no means no, basically, or la يعني لا. And in that matter, I really felt that variable type, which is a kind of recent technology, some hate it, some love it, some would think it has a lot of future, and others things that it's already dead. But for me as a designer, I'm found of the kind of possibilities it can produce, even if we are not very aware of all these possibilities at this moment right now. But at least in this case, I found it to be expressive. I found that using variable technology or variable type was a very handy tool to express the anger, the chant, to for this simple website to turn into some sort of a cyber protest, where this chant is being said over and over again. You can't hear it, but you can see it moving. Um, and typography specifically is this link between sound and visual, because you're looking at letters that has sounds for you in your head. Even if you're not hearing it right now, you are hearing it inside your head. And this is part of the beauty of typography. And from this one, before I wrap my presentation, I left this one to the end, which is the importance of copyleft or open licenses in all the work I've been doing as an activist, as a designer, as a type designer, as a web designer. I think we are all benefiting from this kind of licenses, even though it's sometimes we will be skeptical about, sometimes we will fight it or think that it harms industries. While for me, it represents a very radical thought and a very radical stand against exclusivity. I think I have a trouble pronouncing some letters that is tied to my tongue. But I found that the idea of copyleft and open source to be really a stand against exclusive knowledge, exclusive technologies. It makes things available, and also in my case, I believe that it aids to the spread of the work as well. Like all the work that they showcased here today was published with a copyleft license of some sort. Between being open font license to Creative Commons license to just copyleft, where I just like, there's no copies for these artwork. You can just do whatever you want with it. And not that people will definitely need a license over the internet. Over the internet, people just do whatever they want, and I love that. And but in the same time, I felt that encouraging open licenses encourages the people to be more inspired. They know that they can take the source code, they can take this artwork and do whatever with it, and they are not harming my rights as a designer or as an artist in any form or way. not only this, but as a self-taught who did not really have the chance to an academic study or an academic BA, I learned from everything that was available under open licenses. Open licenses are the reason I was able to learn a lot of what I know today and what I will still learn for the coming years. So I definitely recommend copyleft licenses to everyone, especially if the field of speculating designs is around reaching wider audience and providing an open platform for them to be inspired and create. And this is pretty much it. And I would love to welcome your questions.
Thank you, Mohammed. I'm going to ask you to stop share so we can go back into that gallery screen. And you're welcome to turn on your cameras now, if you wish. And I see that as you were giving us your presentation, Steve wrote a few comments here. The line art is nice. Great job. And Ghaida, wow, as you were going through your slides, and I don't know which one it was. Nice thick stroke, pleasing to the eye. Hi, Steve. It's Steve again. And Steve is asking, is variable type graphics when we're showing motion? So I guess I'm opening it up to you guys. We have a generous amount of time for you to have a conversation and dialogue and a Q&A with Mohammed. So any questions?
I was wondering what program that you use to put together the variable type graphic.
That is Glyphs, and the idea of variable typography is that it is somehow a recent technology where it allows a single font file to have the capability of moving between two axes or two weights, or like the axes can be representing anything, weight, style, certain movement. You can dictate this through the layers you create on Glyphs, or the instances masters you create on Glyphs. But yeah, basically it's Glyphs, the application, and I think you can do that also in FontLab or RoboFont, any of the alternatives.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Mike is sharing the Glyphs app with everyone. The link is below in the chat. Ask away.
I had a question. A lot of what you shared with us was it's quite graphic, and it's very intense in its simplicity. Do you specifically choose to work in black and white, even though in Cairo and in Egypt the colors are super vibrant, and a lot of the inspiration that comes is quite in terms of pop, it's quite kaleidoscopic, but you kind of took that and you really concentrated that. Is there a reason behind that, or is that one of the approaches that you were considering?
I work with black and white quite often, but I think for majority of the artworks I share today was mainly for the purpose of the presentation. I tried to keep the focus more on the typography itself and the calligraphy emblems. But for some of the artworks like Kun Ma Thawra, it was a mix of a vibrant red and black. For many of the others, actually, it had colors in the creation of them. I just like... I've been lately going with the black and white, feeling more confident with it. So just that was the main reason for a majority of the slides we share today.
Here's a question for you from Danielle. As an activist designer, what kind of pushback have you experienced?
What kind of pushback? Can you define pushback? I don't really understand the question. Like, what do you mean by that?
Danielle, you're welcome.
I think, like, what kind of reactions against what you're trying to do? Like, in the United States right now, there's a lot of our Black Lives Matter activists, and then the kind of more fascist activists are now starting to.
Yeah, I understand it now. Yeah, it was definitely a high risk thing to go with from the beginning. Like from whenever I started in 2007. At that time, the risk of being detained, the risk of being identified by the state security, kidnapped, detained, and all that was always present and was always possible. The only advantage we had back then is that the state was not really advanced on the technological aspect. They didn't really care about the internet or know what is the internet basically back at that time. So we were having kind of the higher hand. It was very much easier for us to escape and to be anonymous on the internet. Majority of the work at that time, I was not publishing it under my name. I had a cheesy name that I would rather not share. But I was publishing my work under the name Yasari Masri or Leftist Egyptian. I'm not a nationalist, but this is how I was like back then naming that nickname. But yeah, there was a lot of measures that had to be taken, and being part of this kind of unorganized group of activists that were between revolutionary socialists, anarchists, and it was taken a lot of turns. There was just a lot of measures. Before the revolution, there was a risk. It was not lethal risk. After the revolution, and specifically after the coup of 2013, the risk became way higher than I would personally take as in 2011, 2007. But still, like I would say one of the pushbacks were how every time I used to publish an artwork and I have to think of what kind of results can pop out of this. Like, how will I pay for it? Like, I'll pay for it, and how will I pay for it, and to which extent I am able to pay. So there was that kind of fear, and there was many artworks that I was too afraid to push on the internet. I admit that. So yeah, it was not as free, and there was a lot of like manipulating that I had to do, publish through different websites, through different nicknames, so they don't know who created what or where this comes from. So yeah, there's that.
Sounds like a lot of constant challenges you were going through. Another question, how do you relate the type design to a specific movement?
It's not about relating type design to a specific movement as much as looking at type as a medium in itself. After all, type can just be a tool. It can be your tool of expressing no matter what kind of movement you're trying to represent. I just believe in its capabilities of becoming the medium, of becoming the expressing medium, that the type on its own is enough of a medium for people to relate to take action or be inspired by, rather than looking at it as just a building block in a bigger wall. So it's more about believing in the capabilities of type design and trying to approach it from a kind of a different perspective, at least to my eyes, rather than just like relating to it to a specific movement. Because if we're going to think of the relation, type and calligraphy would be more related to radical Islamic movements, which was the tool for them to move, to use for ages in Egypt, at least, which is I'm aware of. but in the same time, which was a challenge actually, to be like coming from a leftist background and using calligraphy as your tool of expressing revolutionary thoughts, while it is the actual tool of usual radical Islamist movement. That was a challenge, and it was also part of the inspiring challenge for me, because I don't believe the type relates to any specific movement. It, it doesn't belong to the radical right or the radical left. It's a medium, and you can just use it as much as you want to free it.
I love the diversity of questions and your answers. Here's Amjad. Can you explain what's the main steps you do to create your typeface from scratch? What is your process?
It's different from an experiment to another. Sometimes it comes from a very functional place of like, I want to make a typeface that is open source and available for long-running text, and that dictates a lot of the following process. Sometimes I just free myself from any limitations, and I just like to play. Like in a recent typeface that I did not release yet, I forgot. I should be releasing soon. I have always loved black letter, Latin black letter, and thought it's very inspiring. And always in my head, I've always been seeing a relation between it and geometric Kufi. And so this one, I just approached it. I was approaching it just playing, just trying to have fun, and seeing how can Kufi be matching to black letter, and how this like very Western style of writing can relate to a very Eastern Arabic calligraphy style. So it's always different. There's always a different, at least for me, there's always a different way to approach it. And after all, I just try to make it fun. And so yeah, it really depends on the project. But what is mainly common between them all is the research. I'm always trying to dig into manuscripts. I'm trying to always dig into sources of inspiration, and always take it from there. See where things started, and see where I would like to take it now in 2020 or wherever I am.
From Sarah, it's not a question. It's amazing that type and script is no longer a sheer medium of recording history, in the bracket writing. The expressive nature of it and how you amplified it with a visual type, I find that evolutionary in human history. And Salma, hi Salma. What are some of the methods or daily routines you usually follow to help grow and improve your skills? That's a good question.
Yeah. Honestly, as self-taught, I've always been trying to start from watching a lot, seeing a lot, like trying to gain some, to store a lot into my visual memory. Just navigate through any source of inspiration, and everything can be inspiring. Like the typeface I was mentioning, the one matching the black letter, I got the idea from it while walking through like a cemetery in Berlin, and I just saw like how the black letter is present, and got this idea. So it's usually I start with watching a lot, following a lot of the works, digging in manuscripts, just looking for a lot of different sources of inspiration. And while thinking of this, while taking all this in, I try to free myself from thinking of what kind of medium I will be working with. Like I'm getting an idea, but will I be taking this towards a type design path, or I'll be doing something like generative, playing with algorithms to express what I want to come out with, or like I just try to free myself from the medium, and just focus on the approach itself, on the feeling and the idea that I'm trying to express.
I sense that because you're very much a self-taught individual, that you rely quite a bit on your intuition. And the intuition plays a very important role in the way you go about. I'm sensing this.
Yeah, because it's basically all I had. Like I really like I don't think that anything other than the intuition and trying to being a stubborn chaser of experimenting, that mainly was the charging energy for everything I tried to do. Like I don't know how they do it in the academia, but I did not let that be a limitation, rather than, okay, I'll just try to explore and maybe develop my own way, or do it this and that way, and fail and fail and fail. I failed a lot in my path to learn anything. And also relied on a lot who came before me, did a lot of work, and were generous enough not to keep their knowledge exclusive, who felt welcoming and open to share their knowledge with someone who is just thirsty for knowledge and did not have it accessible. So it's more about being patient and stubborn, actually.
And trusting and really being persuasive in your path.
Yeah, I try to be trusting myself as much as possible.
Here's a question from Lubna. How do you see the future of this approach as a cyber protest?
I see a lot of the variables around us tells us that the presence of cyber protests gonna be more and more stronger than ever before. We've been already living and seeing cyber wars. We saw a couple of years ago the cyber war between Iran and the United States. We already, as we are living right now, we see an actual cyber war over data going between Trump and China over the data of TikTok. So this question is very important, and it relates to a reading that I'm doing nowadays for Benjamin Bratton, and if anything, I believe that a cyber war is closer than an actual physical war, and within that, definitely a cyber protest is more present than a protest in the street. Even though a protest in prisons and street is a very strong, valid right that everyone should be doing, but sometimes it becomes a privilege you can't have. Like a simple example is Egypt right now. Like there is always a risk of hitting the street. There is always a risk of taking a protest to the street. But when the risk is a bullet in your head, it's that is not a risk. That is this death sentence. And in similar situations, the internet and the cyber world is the space you have. It's basically what happened in Egypt before the revolution, and basically what's happening now. The internet is again becoming the area for people to try to freely express themselves, but the only difference that's happening now is that the initial systems of the world are more aware of the internet, are more aware of what it means for this much data to be present, and more aware of how they wanted to take control over all this data, all these algorithms, all this AI technology, even if they don't even have the means or know how will they control it. They're just trying. But this kind of cyber war over data power just gives me the idea that, yeah, the presence of cyber protests will be there even more in the future. Even if we don't have the full tools of it now, or even if the tool of representing that in a moving type on a website might not be strong enough, but the future is definitely carrying more power.
Here's a question from Mo. As a self-taught designer, what do you hope to get out of an academic program in the future?
I've been asking myself this question for quite a time now. I think it's many things. One of it is I've been working on my own for like 14, 15 years now. For quite 10 years of them, I am basically working in a room alone, doing all my collaborations online through the internet, not doing any kind of physical reach. So on a psychological level, I'm excited to see human beings and to and to engage with other designers, with other studios, with the actual world. There is that, and there is actually also the discipline of the academia that I'm curious about. While I spent many years believing that I still believe in that academia is not a necessary source of education. There is always alternative ways of learning, and the coming years are definitely carrying a lot of possibilities for alternative academias and alternative methods of learning. But I also did not want to be skeptical of it. Like it's a chance I'm grateful to have, and looking forward to the readings, to the theoretical background it will add to me, to the theoretical thinking that it will theoretical thinking skills that I will be gaining from it. So I'm definitely excited for it.
Super. There are a couple of more questions, again from Mo. Thanks for the answer. Is it going to be at KABK, K-A-B-K?
No, it's not at KABK, but KABK, I'm coming soon. I will keep chasing you. I've been chasing you for 2 years, and I will chase you again. No, it's at Sandberg Institute, Curie Redfield. I think this is the right way to pronounce it in Amsterdam.
Good, good, good. And next question, Mossad from AUK. In your opinion, what qualities and skills should a graphic designer have?
I think it would be to be free of certain limitations that are sometimes put on the designers under the name of user friendliness, or this is what users like, or this is the safe play. I think I personally don't like the term of user friendliness, or relying on user friendliness as a measure of a successful design. Because people who set what is user friendly don't necessarily know that this will be user friendly for everyone. It can be user friendly for users in Europe with amazing internet, but will not be user friendly for citizens in Beirut who are losing electricity every 3 hours and living on a terrible internet like they are in the 80s. So I think it's more about being free from a lot of the limitations that the industry might put on you under many names, and to just explore the ideas without worrying on the medium or worrying about any kind of limitations. Just that will include mistakes. That is fine, and that is totally fine. And mistakes and failures are not like we're living in a big mistake right now. We're existing in a big pandemic mistake. So yeah, that's fine. Just be free.
Yeah. The world is shaking.
Yep.
One last question. Don't be shy. Well, actually, our time is nearly up, and the TypeCal team, we want to thank you, Mohammed Gaber,
Thank you so
for
much.
accepting our invitation. Thanking Jumana for introducing us to Mohammed during our TypeCal meeting, and as they were designing the website for our TypeCal. And I want to thank each and everyone for coming in, joining us today for this talk. And there will be another talk. We will have another talk in September, but we haven't secured a date and all of that. So I better not say anything yet. But you will be informed via Instagram, email, Facebook. We'll chase you. But Mohammed, thank you so much, and best of luck to you in your education. And please stay in touch with us, and we'd love to have you back again. Maybe talk about your experience now that you're sort of distant from Cairo, and that experience of being in a completely newer landscape, and how that kind of shapes and reshapes your thinking. Maybe, who knows? I'm just throwing ideas. So thank you for following us, Steve. Yes. So best of luck, and best of luck to all of you guys who participated tonight. Thank you. Please fill out the survey. You will receive the recording as well, and follow us, and the next talk will be shared with you once we get a full confirmation. Thank you, TypeCal team. Jumana, Lubna, William, Fatma, and Hussein. Hussein is not here. So all the best. Thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.